Blog Talk Radio.
Thank you. County 23, I'll give you a corrected address. So we do have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. We'll get to traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. Over to 273, 273. Over Battalion 18, 18 Battalion. With the 273, 273.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. This is Tom Merrill, and I'm glad you're here with me tonight for tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Today is Tuesday, February 2nd, and I can't believe the year is 2016. I cannot believe we're into 2016. I can't believe we're already into the second month of the year because time just keeps flying by, but yes, we are. And welcome again. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it. And as I say every month and every show, thanks to everybody who's been contacting me via Facebook or Twitter or even email and even phone calls just to talk to me about the professional volunteer fire service that we love so much and things being done in your community and your hometown to exemplify the professionalism that we all covet. And I love hearing from you, and unfortunately I'm hearing about a lot of challenges out there, a lot of recruitment challenges and a lot of retention challenges, and it's something we all face. It's definitely something that's affecting the entire American volunteer fire service, and not a day goes by that we don't read about challenges. As a matter of fact, just a week ago on The Wire, there was information in Maine. Another department in Maine went to their town fathers and asked that they be allowed to start hiring full-time paid firefighters just because, as the chief told the local newspaper, that it's just hard to get people to join our organization. And it was tabled, and they're thinking about it, but it's a common topic we're hearing nationwide. And one thing that can help recruit volunteers is selling the professional image, showing people in your community that what you do is worthwhile. What you have in your organization is a group of dedicated people, a cross-section of your community, all different learning curves, all different personalities, yes, but all committed and all dedicated to serving the community and providing great fire and emergency medical and rescue service and delivering it in a professional manner. And by getting the word out and by exemplifying that, that's just one thing that can help recruit and attract members. And by treating our members professionally, by having good leadership and exercising good leadership skills and traits, we can then hopefully work on retaining those members, understanding we're busy, understanding volunteers' lives are going in many different directions, working 2 jobs, the spouse is working, things like that. There are still things we can do in our firehouse to retain these members. And if we do it in a professional manner, it will certainly help. So as we enter the year 2016, try and focus on being maybe just a little bit more professional, coming up with some ideas to recruit and retain members, and understand that our services are needed. Our services are definitely needed, and as another article pointed out this past month, they're needed now more than ever. Volunteer fire departments need members, and at the same time, the call volume is going up. They're talking the call volume tripling since around 1984. And volunteer firefighters still make up 69% of the nation's fire service. The membership is declining, but the call volume has gone up by nearly triple. And one of the keys to recruitment is possibly reaching out to those millennials, people born in the early 80s through the early 2000s. They're very interested in volunteering from the studies that are coming in, but they don't realize that there's even a need for volunteer firefighters. So that might be one area you can tap. But I would say so far for the first 2 months of the year, that has been one of the challenges that I've been reading the most about, recruiting and retaining members and dealing with the increased call volume. So as 2016 rolls around here, let's focus on things we can do in our department to get the word out that we need members, but we need to do it in a professional manner. If you'd like to call in tonight at any time, as a reminder, the number to call is 760-454-8852. We got a great topic tonight, which we're going to get into shortly. Before we do introduce our guest tonight and start talking about the topic of the evening, just a couple other things. I'd like to remind you that FDIC is fast approaching, April 18th to 23rd in Indianapolis, and for those that have been there, you know just how valuable that training is. You know how you come back fired up and re-energized and re-motivated to go back to your firehouse and show them what you've learned and recommit yourself to being the best firefighter you can be. And for those that have never been there, if you go once, you're going to want to continue to go because it is simply an amazing fire conference, and you meet the brothers and sisters from not just the United States, but all over the world, and everybody's there to enjoy each other's company, to exemplify the brotherhood, but to learn and become even a better firefighter. So that's in Indianapolis, 18th to the 23rd of April. If by chance you have any way of getting there, please try and attend. It is just one of the best conferences ever. And I've been taking my presentation about, was supposed to be in Suffolk County, New York 2 weeks ago to deliver a message to Suffolk County firefighters, and they had a snowstorm which precluded me from flying out of Buffalo, and we got quite a chuckle out of that. Buffalo was sunny and 40 degrees, and I could not fly out of Buffalo to get to Suffolk County, New York, because they had a storm, and I could not get there. And we were laughing because, usually it's the other way around, and we can't get out of Buffalo, but unfortunately I couldn't make it to Suffolk County, but I'm going to be in Ulster County in early April. I'm going to be in Indianapolis. If you are going to Indianapolis, please feel free. I would encourage you and hopefully get to meet you. Come check out my presentation. I'll be doing a 4-hour on Tuesday from 8 till noon, talking about the professional volunteer fire department, talking about the steps that we can implement in our department, talking about how they all work together, from recruitment and retention to how we accept new members, how we encourage people to join, how we interact with the community, how we treat our members, how we develop officers, how we work with social media. Talk about all of that in my presentation and how it all equates in the professional equation. And I'd encourage you and love to attend the class, and I'd love to meet you. But if anybody would like me to bring the class out to them, I love doing it. I love going around and meeting the great firefighters out there. Reach out to me, Tom Merrill. I'm on Facebook. I also have a Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. You can email me at tamerrill63@AOL.com, and I'm on Twitter. And I'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you if you'd be interested in me bringing my presentation out to you, and I'd love to meet you. So feel free to reach out to me. And as I mentioned, I couldn't make it to Suffolk County because of the weather. And just as a reminder for those areas of the country that are experiencing the winter conditions, and again, in Buffalo right now, it's still 40 degrees. It's going to be in the 50s tomorrow. We have not had to deal with snow and ice too much. But just as a reminder, consider winter operations. Make sure you're taking care of your people and your apparatus. Remember to put that vehicle recirculating pump in gear, or engage the recirculating pump on your pumper and ladder if you have a pump on it. Anytime you're going to be stationed outside for a little bit, if you are flowing water, keep those nozzles cracked a little bit so we don't jam up the lines and freeze them. Keep some rock salt in the compartment or de-icer in your compartment so we can spread it around the trucks. Want to do things like that just to take care of our members. And hopefully you got your hydrants marked. You have hydrant flags on them so when they are buried in snow, they're a little easier to find. So it never ends. There's always things to be thinking about. And as we enter the wintertime, that is definitely something hopefully that you've got well in hand, because if we're not, then things happen. We get ice to clog up our lines, and we get firefighters slipping and falling. And speaking of slipping and falling, I just read an interesting thing too. And who has not been on a firehouse floor that's wet because we've been washing the rigs? I didn't realize it or not, but slip and fall injuries are the second leading cause of death, injury, and disability in the workplace. And our volunteer firehouse is definitely considered a workplace. It's also the third leading cause of worker compensation claims. And a lot of people think, if so-and-so falls and hurts himself, they're not going to sue. Well, the studies show, yes, they will, because these injuries can be devastating and they have no other choice. So, yeah, you could find yourself on the wrong end of a lawsuit if we don't take steps in our firehouse to squeegee down the floor, put signs up that remind members that the floor might be slippery, and just keep in the back of your mind that, you know, there will be standing water on our firehouse floors from time to time as we wash equipment and come back from calls and rinse the rigs off and things like that. That, you know, maybe we should definitely be walking into the rigs and not running, and reminding ourselves just to be careful. This was a very eye-opening article. The second leading cause of death, injuries, and disability in the workplace is slips and falls. So just a little heads up on that, because it is something to be aware of. And as we enter 2016, I talk a lot about physical fitness and taking care of ourselves. There was a great article recently in Fire Engineering about taking care of yourself, and it's still not too late for 2016 to make a commitment. Make a commitment to yourself to get in better shape and to take better care of yourself. You know, there's some simple steps that were outlined in Fire Engineering about make a commitment to get exercise 3 to 4 days a week. Start with a half hour of walking or fast running. Drink less soda. Drink more water. Make sure you're getting your comprehensive medical evaluation, you know, and take care of yourself. Commit yourself to that for 2016. And the article, the gist of it was, talk is cheap. Doing it is what's important, and we should commit to that. It's definitely going to help your department. It's going to help you. You're going to feel better, and you're going to function better as a firefighter. So definitely, it was a good article they had there in Fire Engineering. And another interesting article I read, and we run into this every now and then in the volunteer fire service, and we're seeing it more and more. But just within the last month, another article hit. It was pitting neighbors against their local volunteer firehouse. It all had to do with the siren on the rooftop, and the firefighters wanted to keep the siren, and the neighbors were complaining that the siren was too loud, and in this day and age it's not needed. I'd like your take on that. Do we need sirens? I would imagine in a lot of areas of the country we still need sirens. In my area of the country, we did away with rooftop sirens on most departments in my area, 20, 25, 30 years ago. My firehouse that we built is 20 years old now. When we built it new, and we did not move the siren from the old house to the new house, and we've been relying on pager radios and text messaging and pages and things like that as the primary means of alerting our members. So, but it's interesting that it's still in use in many areas of the country, but it's a different world today, and we talk about that in my presentation. It is definitely a different world today. And maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, people just simply overlooked the siren. I remember how loud our siren was, and we had houses within 100 feet of our firehouse in the windows. I was actually dating the girl who lived next to the firehouse, and when I was over there and that siren went off, it would rattle the windows. But back then, nobody said anything. That was just accepted. But it's a different world today, and we need to be cognizant of concerns of our neighbors. And if we do still need these items, we just need to professionally and let them know why we still need it and why it's still such an important alerting device. But I thought that was interesting that, and you see that pop up every now and then, pitting neighbors against their firehouse, and then seeing how the firehouse responds. And in most cases, it's done in a very professional manner. They very nicely outline why they still need to keep their fire sirens. So other things going on. It's fall installation season. We're in full gear with installations. I've emceed a couple installations in my area. Been honored to install some chief officers in my area. And congratulations to all the newly installed officers and chiefs out there. And make a commitment to yourself in addition to what we've been talking about. Continue to learn. Continue to educate yourself. Go get some good leadership books. Go read about leadership, not just in the fire service, but general leadership books. There's some great ones out there. I always say that being a volunteer fire officer is probably one of the hardest jobs there is. There's not a lot that can prepare you for it, and you are dealing with so many different personalities, so many different learning curves, as most leaders do. But the difference in our business is they can choose not to go. They can choose not to go to that call. They can choose not to go to the firehouse to help with that work detail. They can choose not to go to that community event, and there's really not a lot we can do about it. We want to encourage them and motivate them, and we want to lead them in the right way. So to all the new officers, congratulations. I miss my days as a chief officer, but understand that it comes with a responsibility not just to bring everybody home safe and provide great fire and emergency medical and rescue skills to your department, but also to lead your members, lead by example, possess integrity, and take the responsibility to take some training on leadership as well. One last thing, big news hit today. I don't know how many of you have seen it. I think I just saw it on the national news as well, but the Firemen's Association of the state of New York just released a report today, an in-depth, comprehensive report that shows in New York State, taxpayers are saving more than $3 billion annually because of the efforts of the volunteer fire service. And replacing volunteers with paid firefighters would create quite an economic burden on the taxpayers in New York State. They found that an additional, almost 31,000 additional career firefighters would be needed if New York was to convert to all paid service. It would cost $3.87 billion, in addition to a one-time cost of almost $6 billion to acquire the existing stations and vehicles and equipment, and they would have to build over 1,000, close to 1,300 new stations or reconstruct it. It just would be astronomical what would happen. Property taxes rising average of 26.5%. And this was a big study they just released today. You'll find it online, and it's something we can all use in our communities to show them the great, not just the great job we do, but the economic impact we do have in our communities. It's a great report that came out from FASNY to show us the importance of the volunteer fire service to the local community and to the whole state, for that matter. So I encourage you to read it and share it with your community. But at the same time, remember, we have a duty and an obligation not to be arrogant about it. We have a duty and an obligation to fulfill our pledge to be the best firefighter we can be, the best professional firefighter we can be. And unfortunately, it leads us into what we're going to talk about tonight. Sometimes we have people in our organizations that have enjoyed 100 years, 150 years, 75 years of good quality service to their communities, enjoying stellar reputations, and the actions of one or a few can have a detrimental effect for years to come on that department. And one thing that can really be detrimental to a professional reputation was when allegations arise and are proved true for theft or embezzlement or improper financial practices in our volunteer fire department. And I know this is often overlooked because we concentrate so much day in and day out on going to calls and training and being the best firefighter we can be. Sometimes they'll be taking nominations for the meeting for the next election. There's an opening for treasurer, and everyone looks at each other as to who wants the job. They're not always the most popular jobs, but they are so important. And what's important also is when you get people in those positions that are doing a good job, that somehow a mentoring program is placed in place to prepare the next generations of leaders. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how to prevent theft management in our volunteer firehouse and steps we can take to maintain financial integrity in our volunteer firehouses. And I'm very pleased to welcome our guest this evening, Dr. and Fire Chief William Jenaway. Dr. Jenaway is the Vice President of VFIS, Education, Training, and Consulting Services. He's also the President of the Board of Directors of the Congressional Fire Service Institute, and he's a 40-year fire service veteran, and he even served as a fire chief in 2 departments. And he's got a lot to say on this subject. He's written some great articles, and I can't thank him enough for taking the time to be with us tonight to share his information with us and his ideas on what we can do in our firehouses. Dr. Jenaway, are you with us?
I am here, Tom. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Absolutely. We are so glad to have you here and to talk about this. And before we get into any specifics, I always like to ask my guests if you wouldn't mind spending a few minutes introducing yourself to our audience, maybe tell them how you got involved in the fire service and how your career led you to where you are today. You are a man of many hats.
Oh, well, thanks, Tom. Very briefly, when I was a little kid, sort of knee-high to a grasshopper, my dad joined the local volunteer fire department in suburban Pittsburgh, and as a 7-year-old, I would tag along with him and go to the firehouse. And it wasn't long before I decided that it was time to join. In fact, as early as I could join, the month before I was officially allowed to join, I got an application. I joined the fire department. My dad was a chief officer in that department for many, many years, and then I became the fire chief in that community at the ripe old age of 26 back in the 70s. And
wow, young.
I was young. And I was at the time a fire protection engineer working for an insurance company. So I was doubling my daily routine at work with what I love to do, which was the fire department. Even got the chance back a year or so after that to essentially take over the EMS operations from the local funeral director, where I had also helped him out as back then a Red Cross or Bureau of Mines first aid trained medical person. And I just progressed. I moved to eastern Pennsylvania and settled in the community of King of Prussia back in 1981 due to a transfer for work, and continued my service there, and quickly was named assistant chief and then deputy chief and then fire chief, and have also led the community's emergency services board, which is a mix of civilians and fire and EMS personnel, and now am an elected official, in fact, chairman of the board of supervisors for the municipality. So it gives me a lot of opportunity to sort of reflect back and see what I've learned, where I've learned it, and try to apply it in a variety of different ways. I was fortunate enough to also have, as you mentioned earlier, gotten a PhD, and all the while served in fire protection and safety engineering in the insurance industry. And when VFIS had the opportunity to use my skills, I joined them 15 years ago and have been working with fire, EMS, law enforcement, 911 centers, and related types of agencies ever since. I also teach at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia in their graduate program, where I teach risk analysis, disaster preparedness, and strategic planning for public safety. So I get the opportunity to see what's really happening out in the real world. And the research papers that my students do there are unbelievable opportunities for me to not only learn, but to develop techniques that may be of use for various organizations in their day-to-day activities. And financial services, it is amazing how many challenges there are with fire departments and how they manage their funds. Everything from, some of the things are really astounding. There are fire departments who clearly don't do cash flow analysis to determine how much they can spend. There are fire departments that don't take the time to develop budgets. There are fire departments that simply will spend until they run out of money. And all of these are contradictory to good business management. And as you mentioned in the professional fire department, we're a business. And if you can't manage your money in this business, you're going to go out of business sooner or later.
I think there was one that just filed for bankruptcy within the last year. I don't have it in front of me, but I remember reading about a fire company, a volunteer fire company, just a few months ago, filing for bankruptcy, I believe.
Not far from you, Tom. It was up in northwestern Pennsylvania.
Okay, so you're familiar with that. Yeah, see, that's unfortunate.
Yes. And it's a shame because there are good techniques to use. In fact, at BFIS, we've published numerous documents on funding fire services or fire and EMS services, and it's nothing more than establishing a budget, looking at a chart of accounts, making sure that your cash flow is going to be able to handle your expenses, and if not, then you either have to increase those revenue streams or you have to find some way to cut or find some philanthropic institution. But it gives you the tools that you can use to then better develop your own financial management practices in your organization. And it's a key component of the textbook that we have on managing combination and volunteer emergency management organizations, which we give to clients on a daily basis.
Right. Dr. Jenaway, before we go much farther, I forgot we have a new sponsor, and I'd like to run their commercial real quick, and then we'll get into some specific questions. But I'd like to remind anybody while we do this, if you'd like to call in tonight to this episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, the number is 760-454-8852, and perhaps Dr. Jenaway, Chief Jenaway, can answer some questions you have about things going on in your department and how he can help, maybe give you some ideas on proper financial management. And but again, that number is 760-454-8852. And this episode of Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio is brought to you by Right Rescue Systems.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot Rat. You can find us at rightrescuesystems.com.
Excellent. That's great. We thank Right Rescue Systems for sponsoring all these great fire engineering talk radio shows. It's really important that they do that, and we're very thankful to them. And Dr. Jenaway, unfortunately, it seems to me this company that filed for bankruptcy not that long ago, and it seems like in addition to that, not a month goes by, and I hate to say maybe it's every other week, but it seems quite frequently anyway that we're reading about unfortunate stories of embezzlement and theft in our volunteer firehouses. Does it seem to be more today than maybe years past, or are we just more aware of it now? Is it because media is more in tune with it? What do you think?
I think you hit the nail on the head, frankly. We are more attuned to it now because people are looking at this. We have systems today that can identify it quickly. Let's face it, 25 or 30 years ago, all of this was done by hand. No one had QuickBooks or any tool like that, or even a basic spreadsheet to manage their funds in some electronic fashion. So it was all done by hand. And when it comes right down to it, the opportunity for people to inadvertently or intentionally take something was happening, and we may or may not have known about it. But I think today the systems in place, coupled with the media and the various forms of media, have allowed us to be better attuned to these kinds of problems. But you're right. It's every week or every other week something hits the IFC dispatch, and it's on the national newswire.
Yeah, and talk about a blow to a professional reputation, and the reputation we want to enjoy as firefighters is being honest people with integrity, and it might, one person doing that affects an entire organization, and it's really a shame.
It is, and it ranges from the individual, sort of the lone wolf, where the opportunity is there and they've taken some money, maybe because of personal need or whatever, all the way up to the conspiracies. And the largest one that I have seen is approximately $2 million, and it was a multitude of people who conspired to use the funds of the organization in a variety of ways, and frankly thought nothing of it until they were caught. And then they had to pay the real price, because at that point it wasn't some incidental amount that could be returned through restitution. This was something that jail time had to be assigned to. So and it's not just the taking of dollars, it's the cashing of checks, it's the writing of bad checks. It's even to the extent where there is one case study of over $300,000 of misuse of fire department credit cards.
How does that even get out of control like that? Wow. Well, we're going to get into that, that's for sure. But, yeah, it's easy to say, too, that... Go ahead.
Tom, if I could add one thing.
Yeah.
There's a fellow in my fire department named Vince. And I know Vince isn't listening tonight, but I wish he were, because he would realize how I appreciate what he does. At every fire company meeting, it is Vince that goes through every bill that's paid on that register that every member of the organization sees, on what checks were written, to whom they were written, and what the amounts were, and what they were for. And if there is something that doesn't make sense, we have Vince. And every organization needs a Vince to oversee what the treasurer does, to oversee what a bookkeeper does, oversee what checks are being signed. Everybody needs a Vince.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to fast forward to something I was going to bring up later, but I'm going to ask you before, because I don't want to forget it. In my fire department career, and I've been in one department, and I am now I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, I just got elected as a fire commissioner, both at my fire commissioners meeting and at my fire department meeting. And I'm also a member of our Benevolent Association, which is a health and wellness association, and at that meeting, every single check that is written, every single financial transaction is read out loud by the treasurer when he does his report. And it's an opportunity for everyone to pay attention and listen. But one story I heard at some VFIS training actually that I took was, and I laughed, usually when the treasurer goes to do his report, that's when people turn to the guy next to him and say, hey, did you watch that game last night? Hey, are you going to the softball game next week? Or did you see the play last night in the basketball? No one... You want people to pay attention, but inevitably sometimes people just don't pay attention. But is that a requirement that report's read out loud, or is that just a good financial practice?
I think it's a good practice. There are various requirements that suggest that, particularly in membership organizations, where the bills that are being paid have to be shown and have to be voted upon. And this will go back to the bylaws of the various organizations, and whether you're board-driven or whether you're membership-driven, it can vary. Gotcha.
I found it's a great practice, and we have caught things over the years by those being read that maybe a mistake was made or something like that. So I would preach to people that use that, if they are being read, use it as an opportunity to pay attention what's going on in your organization. Make sure the bill being paid was authorized at one time or as part of your regular budgeted amount or whatever the case may be. Try and pay attention. I think that's important.
You're right, Tom. And in these days, organizations should have budgets established that track to revenue lines as well as expense lines or their chart of accounts. And I know that what good financial practices suggest is that your revenues match to, your expenses match to revenue streams. For instance, if you have a grant, this is probably the simplest example. If you have a grant for $10,000 to do X, anything associated with that grant project should be expensed accordingly, tracked accordingly, and so on, so that you don't run over the $10,000. The same would go for if you have building maintenance tasks that are assigned to 15% of your tax budget. Then when you hit 8, 9, 10% and you're only in June, you know that you only have 5% left that you have to monitor to. So
right.
Establishing proper business budget practices and monitoring techniques makes a lot of sense in our world, particularly when most small fire departments operate on $100,000 or less. And it doesn't take long to blow through $100,000 in today's world.
Oh, because when you put FD on a product that you're about to buy, it seems to quadruple the price or more. Anything, you could get something for $1, but you put FD on it, now it's going to cost you $10. So, but you know what, Dr. Jenaway, am I right?
Tires at one time either.
Right. Now, one thing, it's easy to talk about this, and we know we should have these programs in place, but as I mentioned earlier, these are often tough positions to fill. It's tough to find that good treasurer or that good auditor. So once we find them, how do they, if they've never been shown the way, where do they learn this? How do they get some ideas on what they should be doing? They got to go to some training, right?
That's true. There are a couple of other things that we see happening now on a regular basis. One of these is that most organizations use a bookkeeper. So that while a treasurer may have been the person who did all of the financial work in the past, bookkeepers in today's world are used much more extensively. Then the next question comes, well, who pays for that? Well, part of it can be a contribution from that bookkeeping company or that accounting firm to do that for the fire department. I'm pretty sure CPAs in all states have to do a certain amount of pro bono work. Why not tap into that opportunity and get it instead of the Boy Scouts or the baseball team or whatever? Nothing against them, but let's be a little parochial for a change and get something for ourselves. The other thing that I see happening quite a bit is reaching out into the community and actually getting a financial person to be the treasurer or the bookkeeper. And that person, while not necessarily a firefighter, they would be a civilian member or could be a civilian member, and that's how they would contribute to the organization.
You know, there's a lot of good merit to that, and as I talked about earlier too with recruitment, another idea in the whole recruitment equation is to do things like that, where maybe you recruit support members that or administrative members, however you want to term it, where maybe they're not going to be taking a hose line into a building, or maybe they're not going to put a Band-Aid at someone that's bleeding, but they're there to offer other areas of support. And this is a huge one. It's probably one of the most important administrative functions that needs to be filled and filled correctly and by someone that not just knows what they're doing but takes it seriously. So that's a great idea.
And those types of techniques where going out and getting board members and so on has become more and more prevalent. And you know, while we're talking about some issues, one of the things that we have seen recently deals with IRS 990 forms, which the overwhelming majority of volunteer fire departments have to submit to the IRS. These forms have a series of questions that go with them. And if you try to do these yourself, which you can and very successfully do, you have to make sure that when you fill the forms out, if you check off that, yes, you have something, you should indeed have that. And there are 3 or 4 good examples. There's a checkoff block in there that says, yes, we have a whistleblower policy. There's a checkoff block in there that says, yes, we have a records retention policy. There's another one that says we have a conflict of interest statement. And there's a 4th one that deals with investment policies. The bottom line out of this is that if you don't have those documents available, if you're ever audited or if there's ever a check on it, it could mean the loss of your 501c status. And we have seen that happen to organizations. So,
and for those that are out there that don't, what is 501c?
Well, and the Internal Revenue Service, when they authorize a business, they will classify you as either a 501c3 or 501c4. There are some other types of corporations, but those are basically classes of nonprofit corporations. And I would encourage every organization and everybody listening, if you don't know if you're a 501c3 or a 501c4, you should find out. And you can go to your IRS 990 forms. You have to indicate on there whether you are or not. But most nonprofit corporations, all nonprofit corporations that I know of, have a filing like that. It might go back 50 years or 60 years. But sometime when your organization was formed, you had to get that to have an employee identification number and some other types of documentation.
Gotcha. And when you talk about these programs, can you quickly summarize what's a whistleblower policy?
Right. Well, a whistleblower policy is much what we've heard about with people blowing the whistle on somebody. So you and I are in the same organization, and I believe that you're stealing money. And I go and I tell somebody, and I'm the whistleblower. I have blown the whistle on you for taking money out of the kitty at bingo night. And I cannot, under a whistleblower policy, you are legally not allowed to be retaliated against or removed from the organization or things of that nature. So it establishes a framework for your organization to enable people, if they see wrongdoing going on, to be able to come forth and make their statements.
Gotcha.
The big firm in Texas is the most classic one. I won't mention the corporation, but they were the classic one with the whistleblowers. A records retention is I'm sorry?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Records retention is very simple. You should have some time frame that after which records are destroyed or microfished or in some other way maintained. But you don't need to keep hard copies of documents for 100 years anymore. My organization is the same as the municipality. We keep them for 10 years, and then we dispose of them, or we keep the ones we need on some type of electronic format, but the hard copy stuff is tossed. The other thing is a conflict of interest statement. And technically, to assure that someone isn't selling product to their own organization or selling services to their own organization and making usurious profits out of it, the conflict of interest statement serves that purpose, so that those are signed each year by all elected officers, so that there's an understanding that people are not there just for their business, that they are there to help the organization.
And that one surfaces quite a bit.
Yeah, and the best one that comes in is an investment policy. You should never let one person make investments for your organization. That's not to say that you can't have a financial advisor, but we've come across fire departments that have Joe Jones, one of their members, is pretty good. He's done well personally, and they let him do this. And we found one fire department where that person had actually put all of the fire department's funds in their personal name and invested them as such. And thank goodness nothing happened to that gentleman. But those are the kinds of real-world things that happen, and when they do, the fire department's world falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And usually, I think from what I've read, too, in so many of these poster cases, so many of these cases that you study up or read about, the person or persons that are doing this, they don't always start out with the worst intentions. For example, that person takes $20 out of the coffer on bingo night because he owes somebody $20, and he always means he's going to pay it back. But then he sees no one caught it, and he maybe did pay it back, but he says to himself, gosh, nobody even noticed. The next time it's $50 or $100, and usually begins a snowball effect, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. That's exactly the way it starts. And for the most part, nobody's going to miss the $20. So $20 this week, $20 next week, $20 the week after. Nobody misses it until $20 goes to, well, if I can do that, I can get 40. If I can get 40, I can get 100. And then sooner or later, the greed in the person will take over, and they'll get caught. But up to that point, wow, you can end up with tens of thousands of dollars of loss.
Yeah. And you outline in your articles, too, about why it's important for leaders to lead and to have good job descriptions for the different officers in an organization. Does that help with financial integrity? Having good, solid job descriptions, people need to be aware of what their job is. Is it true that sometimes people take these different jobs in their organization and they really don't know what's expected of them?
I had a fella come up to me at one training session that I did, and he didn't realize that there was anything other than any other responsibility other than when a bill came in, he would write a check, and he would have the checks pre-signed by the president so that he could expedite the check and get it paid right away. He didn't realize that he didn't realize that there were any of those kinds of issues. And he said to me, because I raised the question of, do you do credit checks on individuals who are responsible for handling organizational funds? And I said, if you don't do them in your organization, then most bonding companies will do that. And this same fellow said, what's a bond? And I explained to him, well, that's an insurance coverage that will protect you in your organization should the money be stolen. And he said, oh, well, he sent me a message about a month later, and he said, I'm the only one of our officers that in their credit check for the bonding company was able to be bonded. So that organization ran a significant risk, not because the people were bad or because they were, potential thieves or anything of that nature, but the hierarchy had some credit issues, and sometimes the credit issue develops into an opportunity.
So you recommend definitely people handling your financial transactions in the fire company should have a credit check done on them.
Yes.
And also
credit check
the company should
yes.
The company should also bond those members, correct?
Absolutely.
Which is another expense for these poor companies that sometimes are struggling to make ends meet, but it's a necessary expense.
It is one of those necessary evils. And in the favor of a bond, it's not really expensive. We're not talking thousands of dollars. We're talking probably a few hundred.
So in most volunteer fire companies, we just had our elections back in December in most cases, so these people take office come January. And in a lot of cases, as I said, who wants to be vice president, who wants to be treasurer? Sometimes people look around the room because they can't find people to do the job. So they're fortunate enough now, hey, Joe Smith is going to do this treasurer's job because, you know what, he's got the time, his kids are older now, oh, we're so lucky, but Joe Smith may not have a clue as to what he's doing. And even worse, if the company does a credit check and find there's some problems or can't bond him, that company may have to find someone else to do the job, and there may be no one else to do it, so they'll let Joe do it anyway.
Exactly.
That's probably a case that plays out all over.
Exactly. It does, and see it on a regular basis.
So what do we do? What are some of the steps, then, that we can put in place to safeguard our department? Even say we've got Joe Smith in there who maybe didn't get the best credit check. It's maybe not because he did anything illegal or bad, but let's just say he's got a poor credit history, but we still allow him to be our treasurer. So if the company still puts good safeguards in place and follows good financial practices, they should be well protected. Bonding's one of them, for sure. Bond that treasurer. But what are some of the other safeguards we should be putting in place in our volunteer fire companies?
Well, Tom, we actually have 10 practices that we recommend. The first one is to have financial policies in writing. I mentioned a couple of those a few minutes ago, but it's important to understand that if the organization has a credit card, they ought to have a policy for it, and they ought to have an expense accounting procedure for it. If the fire department has an investment practice, they ought to have a policy for that. They should establish how people should be dealing with their assets. And these are not difficult things to develop. You can get them off the internet, frankly. They are not things that are onerous. They are very simple to implement, but they establish expectations. And I think that when you mentioned earlier about job descriptions, these types of policies, job descriptions, procedures, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, they establish the expectations of performance that the organization should have to be a professional fire department, whether you're volunteer, combination, or career. So number one is to have those policies in writing and people understand them. The second item is to have two members present any time that cash changes hands, and to try and have a central location for collecting that cash. And also, when you're going to deposit the money, to have two people doing it. You know, and I recall in Western Pennsylvania, when I lived there, we had bingo every Thursday night. It was the biggest thing in town. Everybody came to bingo. We made tons of money. And one of the good things about that was that we always had two people that were counting the money behind the bar, and we always had two people that took the money to the drop box in the bank immediately thereafter. The other good thing was the bank was only a block from the firehouse. We could jump in one of the small transport vehicles and just go right around the block, dump it in, and drive right back in the firehouse. But the point was, we were doing it back then, and we didn't know what we were doing. That was a specific financial management practice. We just figured it was the right thing to do. Just have somebody double checking so that we put the right amount of money. I think we were more concerned about the banker calling us up the next day and telling us we made a mistake than we were about anybody stealing the money.
Yeah.
But those are the times.
Cash is huge. That's definitely one of the big ones, because how many boot drives have you gone through where they're on the corner collecting, and you usually, in a lot of cases, just have one firefighter standing there reaching out for the cash.
And one of our case studies is the theft of $600 of cash during a boot drive.
Yeah.
And it was protected with insurance, but that's another issue.
Yeah, I think the phone broke up there. What did you say about that?
No, I said we had one of our case studies is an individual that took $600 from a boot drive.
Okay.
And it just wasn't properly accounted for. It was protected because they had some insurance coverage that covered them for this type of a loss, for a theft loss.
So good idea to have two people, if not more, together collecting that cash and depositing that cash.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's definitely a dicey area.
Yep. The third item is to have credit card accountability. I mentioned the case study we have, over $300,000, and this fella used that credit card to buy unbelievable things. It had nothing to do with the fire department. It took him several months to get caught, but he got caught. But having that credit card accountability procedure in place is very, very important, and also an expense accounting procedure. Most fire departments don't think about that, but every corporation that has credit cards or has expenses has some kind of an expense account policy, and they have a form. And it's not hard to get one from somebody's company and modify it for yourself. So another good practice. And speaking of two people, requiring two signatures for checks and only signing them after the check is written in full. So have somebody write the check out, print it off the computer, whatever, then sign them. Don't pre-sign the checks.
And again, it seems unbelievable, but we read about that, right, where guys are getting checks pre-signed. You see that in some of these case studies where the abuse started by having blank checks that were signed, and then they would take them and buy what they wanted with them. It was not helping the department at all.
Absolutely. I mentioned number 5 earlier. That's assign a team or a committee for investment responsibility, not just one person. And bank statements, when they come in, they ought to be reviewed on a monthly basis, assuming that you get them in the mail. If you download them offline, the same thing. Somebody should be reviewing them on a monthly basis.
I found an interesting practice at a company I'm very familiar with employed, and they have the bank statement and credit card statement go get mailed to a house other than the treasurer's house. So there's someone else's eyes looking at it ahead of time. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. That's a good idea, but that's what they do.
Good idea. Yeah, usually, it's probably going to cost you $6 in today's world because the bank's probably going to hit you up for 2 transactions. But it's a good idea. Very good. Number 7 is conduct background checks. I mentioned this earlier for people with fiduciary duties like the treasurer or the bookkeeper. Or I just went through this with my department when we got the bond insurance. Every officer that has any responsibility for finances is in the bond. And the bond is taken out for the entire cash flow for the year. So that's typically the way we've done it. The one thing that particularly small organizations have trouble with is managing people that get into office. And by that I mean, if possible, you should prohibit family members or people with close personal ties from simultaneously holding positions with financial responsibilities, particularly like the president and treasurer, or the vice president and treasurer. And we have a couple of case studies where 2 family members, or in one case, they weren't even husband and wife yet, they were just friends, where they colluded to steal money. And we're not talking about $5. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. And, they have the opportunity again, and that's whenever bad things happen. So family members or close people with close...
in the volunteer companies, because you know as well as I do that volunteer fire companies thrive on families. We're all about family, and we've got generations upon generations of family, and in some cases, you've got many family members or related members and working and sharing duties and responsibilities. That could be a tough one, but it makes sense. But boy, is that sometimes tough in the volunteer world.
Right. And there's also 3 types of insurance that come in handy. One is the bond, which we mentioned. Another is fidelity coverage, which is theft-type coverage, and this can be on people that aren't bonded as well as those that are. But clearly people can come in and steal funds from you or extort funds in various ways and so on. And the third is just traditional crime coverage, so that if someone comes in and steals things from you, you can get insurance coverage for that as well. And point number 10 are audits. There should be a regular audit done within the organization. There should be at least once a year an all-inclusive audit. And most states require fire districts, fire companies, or fire departments to actually obtain an independent audit from a CPA or some accounting firm that will at least account for the monies that you receive from taxes. So those kinds of those are 10 techniques that we like to see in all organizations.
Now, with the audits, you outlined 3 different ones. The independent one, that's pretty easy to understand. So what are the other 2 within the organization itself? Is that just a group of members that do it?
Right, for the small fire department. And again, we have them as clients that have $30,000 a year budgets. Well, for a $30,000 a year budget, you can put 3 knowledgeable people of the process in a room, preferably non-familial, and they can go through the checks and they can go through the bank registers and so on, and they can see that, yes, we took in this amount of money, yes, we spent it in these checks, and everything was done properly. So that's the most simplistic type, is where internal auditors, if you will conduct it. The second one is an all-inclusive type audit, and I should say A might only be for sub-accounts also. B would be a more inclusive audit that might involve all of your accounts, including any kind of investment accounts and so on. Sometimes this might be too big for that small team to do, or you might be up into the couple hundred of thousands of dollars, and you might want to get some assistance. And again, this is where a local accountant might be of assistance to do this and might do it pro bono. If you have a university around, if you have a high school around with accounting expertise, doesn't hurt to get the accounting teacher to come in and help out and do stuff like that. Always look to use those outside technical resources when you can. And then the third one is the full CPA-oriented financial audit.
Good practices, definitely good practices. And just like to take a second here to remind our listeners that this is Fire Engineering Talk Radio. I'm Tom Merrill, and we are talking the Professional Volunteer Fire Department with Dr. William Jenaway, who's helping us with some practices we can put in place in our volunteer firehouses to maintain our financial integrity. And as a reminder, we are being brought to you by Right Rescue Systems.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot Rat. You can find us at rightrescuesystems.com.
Thanks so much to Right Rescue Systems for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it. And if anyone would like to call in, if you have a question for me or Dr. Jenaway, I want to talk about some things going on in your firehouse regarding your financial practices or anything, give us a call at 760-454-8852. Again, 760-454-8852. And Chief, I have a question for you about these credit cards, because they're very prevalent in the fire service today. When I was a chief, I had a credit card in my name, but I could only use it if my fire commissioners, who I reported to, authorized it the month ahead of time that I was going to use it to purchase a piece of equipment or to make reservations for an upcoming training event. But in 99% of the cases, I had to have prior authorization, and if I didn't, I had to still, even for the authorized purchases, and if there were some that I had to make during that month that maybe weren't authorized, they were made on an emergency basis, I had to take my receipt, we called it a voucher form, which indicated what the date of the transaction was, what it was for, what I needed it for, and I had to turn that in, and it still really had to be approved, and if it wasn't, I could be on the hook for whatever I spent. So I think that was a pretty good practice to be put in place. But you see a lot of credit card abuse out there, isn't there?
There is a fair amount of credit card abuse, and it's interesting because we're not the only ones that have seen that. The banks have seen it. And most banks now, and you raise a good point because it had your name on it, most banks will not issue a department credit card today. You may still find some out there that will do it, but the majority of banks require individuals to be personally responsible for the funds that are spent using that credit card. And I know that I was surprised about 5 years ago when we changed banks at our fire department and we went to get the 5 officers' credit cards. They would not give them to us unless we filled out credit applications. And my question was, well, why? This is a fire department credit card. And they said, frankly, because business techniques at banks have changed and now individuals are responsible for their business expenses. And then it's your responsibility to go and get those legitimate expenses reimbursed. So I think what was happening, people were probably blending expenses. So they had the credit card. They were going out, legitimately buying gas for my car, dinner for the family, whatever the case might be, and it's on that credit card, and the fire department paid it and then had to go back to the individual to get the money for the personal expenses. So now it's, okay, you can use the fire department credit card, but Joe Jones or Bill Jenaway, that bill is coming to you, and you have to pay it, and then you go to the fire department to get reimbursed for what you spent on fire department business. And we have been hearing more and more about that from banks all up and down the East Coast and into the Midwest.
And no debit cards, right? Isn't that something we want to preach to, that we don't really want to issue debit cards?
Yeah, they're a bad deal.
Yeah, because that money's gone, right?
They're opportunity, right? And let's face it. If you need cash, there's an easy way to do that. From the fire department, there's an easy way to do that. You can have a Chief's Petty Cash Fund. I always had one. You can have, just get a check cut by the treasurer, go to the bank, and get whatever cash you need for whatever function you're going to have. But the Chief's Petty Cash was always a good method to pay for something if somebody needed to go get something really quick. And mine was always $500. So it always worked. Did I ever run out? Sure. Then I go to the treasurer and I say, give me another $500. Here's the receipts. Give me another $500.
And you still had to show receipts for what that petty cash was being used for, correct?
Absolutely. And I had a budget so that if I was coming close to my budget, and what we planned was $500 a month for petty cash. And you do the math, $6,000 over the course of a year. If I was coming close to $6,000, then the tap was shut off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I know I've heard stories and read about petty cash funds where whoever was getting that fund, and in a lot of cases it's a chief of the department or a president, no accountability, just time to replenish the petty cash. And okay, put another $300 in it or whatever, but no receipts being turned in. Bad practice.
Bad practice, yes.
Yeah, definitely got to have accountability. Another thing I was thinking of too, when you were talking about the audits earlier, I took a class, I remember learning, a very good treasurer pointed out to me once, red flags in the firehouse, and it doesn't pertain to fire ground safety. It was financial integrity safety, and one of the biggest red flags is if you have a treasurer or somebody involved in your finances kind of say, don't worry about doing an audit. We don't need one of those. Or they're too expensive. Everything's fine. We don't need to do it. I would say that's a red flag.
I would too. In fact, I would expect anybody coming into any financial-oriented position to want a clear slate and have an audit done before they took office, just to make sure that everything was appropriate.
Do you have any other red flags that you can tell people to be aware of? Are there some common red flags out there that might point the department, make them aware that there might be some improprieties going on?
The use of cash. And I know that there are a lot of people out in the real world that like to do a cash business. Well, in today's world, a cash business for something like a fire department can be problematic because you never know how that cash is being used. You never know where it's going to. You never know how it's flowing, and you're better off with that paper trail, I guess is the best way to put it. And having that elimination of cash as much as possible is a good thing to do.
Yeah, and it's hard.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and no, I was just going to say, and again, it's hard when we're dealing with anything cash. It just leads to such potential for theft and mismanagement, and so that's definitely something that should be looked at by companies to address is how to properly handle cash, and then maybe how to best get away from cash as often as possible. Not always easy, especially with bingo and boot drives and things like that.
Right. We're always going to have it, but try to stay away from it as much as possible. And the other thing that we have seen much more this year than ever before, I should say, in 15 than ever before, was the whole issue of departments looking to make significant capital purchases and not doing a good cash flow analysis to assure that they can ultimately pay for the asset that they're trying to get. And this is whether it's a vehicle or a building or equipment. It just seemed to be much more prevalent in 2015 than ever before on departments either having to return assets or extending out the debt or going bankrupt or threatening bankruptcy before somebody came in and bailed them out.
Yeah, we certainly know that equipment's not inexpensive, so they're outlaying a lot of cash, or they're putting their company on the line for a big expense, and sometimes they're not prepared to do it. They don't realize that implication, and they want because it's the latest and greatest with all the bells and whistles, but they didn't do enough analysis to see if it's something they truly can afford without hurting their company.
Absolutely right.
Wow. Yeah, we certainly covered a lot tonight, a lot of financial practices that we could put in place in our volunteer department to take care of the financial end of things. And you know what I forgot to mention, and I think this is a true statement, that we mentioned how often lately we've been reading about either mismanagement or misappropriation or embezzlement of funds, whatever you want to call it, and the bottom line is it always brings embarrassment to a company, which in many cases still has many great members, is doing great service. But isn't it true that even though we're hearing about it more and more, there is still so much that goes unreported because maybe that department detects the theft themselves and they deal with it internally because they don't want the bad press. So this could be a lot more prevalent than we even know because of that.
Absolutely, and if they can get restitution from that individual, there may be nothing further said. They may say, okay, give us the money back at $50 a month for the next 5 months, and we're good to go. And they may still be in the fire department.
Right. Slap on the wrist, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have, it sounds like you've been associated with some great departments, with some great practices, some great people. So as I always liked when we got a secretary or a treasurer that was in the job for many years because they get to learn the job and then they learn the best practices. And is there anything you've seen that is the best practice for getting somebody ready to be the next treasurer, the next one doing the audits, the next one that's going to be taking this role? Because, again, in some cases, the firefighter might have joined 6 months ago. Congratulations, you're now the treasurer. Or even if it is a long-time member, they're giving it to him because he retired, but they have no clue as to where to begin. Is there any programs you've seen? Is it mentoring? Is it sitting with somebody? Is it sending them out for formal training, which could be costly? Or is there volunteer? Is there free training out there on websites and through your affiliations and things like that?
Tom, I'm sitting here chuckling to myself because
Why is that?
I remember as a young 19-year-old college student, the treasurer in my fire department said to me, "Bill, I'm not going to run for treasurer next year." This is in November. The elections are in November. He says, "Bill, I'm not going to run for treasurer. I'm going to nominate you. You're going to school. You're studying business. You ought to know how to do this." Well, the next night I was the treasurer, and I was given the book. I was given the books for not one account but three accounts: the bingo account, the fire department account, and the relief association account, and said, "Here you go." I got no mentoring. I got no training. I got no instruction sheet. Nada. So
I think that's a common story.
I really can relate to you. So here's what I've seen before. You mentioned mentoring. If a department is looking for a transition to occur, the best thing that can happen is for that person to mentor the replacement for a period of time. Whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, however long it takes, and it's going to depend upon the complexity of the organization. But mentoring is the number one way that this can work. Some departments have an assistant secretary-treasurer. They combine the positions, and the backup person is learning how to do both at the same time. But it not only provides for learning the job, but it develops cross-trained individuals in the case that the secretary gets hit by a bus and the treasurer gets hurt at a fire scene and can't go to calls anymore. Now you have backup. So it doesn't hurt to have someone who knows the system that can fill in an emergency, can train somebody else, or can take over the job if appropriate. The other thing is written instructions for everything. I remember when we had Y2K at work, one of the things we did was take every automated process and write down in manual fashion or through a flow chart how that work was done. And the purpose for that was just in case systems crashed, we knew how to do the job and we could remember all the things we had to do. Well, what better way to learn how to do these kinds of jobs that in some cases rotate pretty frequently? Why not have everything written down as to how the job works, and then when a new person comes in, give them the book. Same with new board members. We have an administrator's manual that's just like an SOG manual for firefighters. And the administrators, when they become new members of the board or new vice president or whatever the case may be, they get an administrator's manual. And that has how all the different things are to be done in the organization. Not all the details of the treasurer, but has the job descriptions, has the expectations, has the annual, or I should say the monthly to-do tasks in there for each position. All of that's established so that when there is turnover, it's an easier transition.
Sounds that I call that the C word, communication. It's so important in so many areas of our department's operation to communicate effectively with our people. And in this case, we're communicating to let them know their roles, their responsibilities, their job descriptions, as we talked about earlier. So important in our talk here about having good, well-defined job descriptions with directions and instructions on what that job entails. Absolutely. And if anybody would like to call in, I'd like to remind you the number again is we're going to be winding things up here, but if you'd like to get a last-minute call in, feel free. then give me a call at 760-454-8852. We'd love to hear from you, and if you have any questions or need any information before we sign off here, give us a quick call, 760-454-8852. Again, this is Fire Engineering Talk Radio in the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, and I am with Dr. Jenaway, and I really appreciate your time tonight and taking the time to talk about this really important subject. And sometimes it gets buried with all the other things going on in the fire service and the glory stories of tactics and strategy and the big fire and the big rescue or medical call. Sometimes we lose track of the fact that there's still a lot of behind-the-scenes support work that needs to be done as professionally as handling emergency calls. And taking care of the finances is certainly a huge part of that, and certainly a huge part of creating and maintaining that professional image and reputation in our home department. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, Tom. And I guess my sort of closing comment would focus around the fact that we could sit here and talk all night long about the big job. And I could talk to you for weeks about fires that I've been to over the years, and rescues and stupid calls and so on. But nothing will cause a fire department to crash and burn faster than the loss of all of your funds, or a substantial portion of the funds, or enough funds to make you stop and go and ask somebody for a bridge loan. That's what will kill a fire department faster than anything else. So even though this might be rather mundane to most of the people who want to talk about fire department operations, this is the thing that will kill you the first: the failure to manage the cash operations of your organization.
And one word gets out of mismanagement, misappropriation, theft, stealing, when Mr. or Mrs. Smith, as the great Chief Brunacini calls our customers, sits down to write that fund drive check, to make that donation to their local volunteer fire department, or sees members at a street corner handing out boots for donations, that Mr. and Mrs. Smith for sure is going to take a step back and think to themselves, is this really where I want my hard-earned money to go, based on the story I just read recently about theft or stealing? It really, really does impact the department in so many ways.
You're absolutely right.
Dr. Jenaway, if somebody would like to reach out to you because they have some questions or would look for some guidance or some information from you, can you let us know the best way to get a hold of you in case some of our listeners listening would want to get a hold of you for some information or for some guidance or help? Absolutely. The easiest way is to reach me via email, and that is Jenaway, W-J-E-N as in Nancy, A-W-A-Y, at VFIS.com. Excellent. And you've certainly been a great help to me. I've already learned a ton, and I've already incorporated some of this information in my presentation on the Professional Volunteer Fire Department as one of what I like to call the building blocks that goes into building the strong foundation of a professional department. And before I got a couple last things I got to talk about, but before you sign off, Dr. Jenaway, is there any last-minute pieces of advice you'd like to give or reiterate a couple of the strong points here that we made tonight that are certainly some of the most important points and messages you want to get across tonight? I think the most important thing is to put a responsible person in charge of your financial management of your organization. And if you don't have someone in the organization that wants to do it or can do it, don't hesitate to go outside and get someone from the community. Start with a bank, start with a school district, start with just the Better Business Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary, one of the service clubs. But get a person in that position that will handle the job of managing your finances. They don't have to be a firefighter. They just have to be able to take care of your money. Great. Great advice, Dr. Jenaway, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It was great information. A lot of important things were talked about, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, please feel free to reach out to him. He's been a tremendous asset to help out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely, and I look forward to meeting you and talking to you in Indianapolis in a couple months.
Will do.
Thanks again, Doctor. So what a great show that was. A lot of good information. And again, not maybe, the glory of firefighting and tactics and strategy and, handline use or truck use or anything like that, but just so important, such an important topic, and so important to take it seriously. And again, it plays such an important role in the foundation of a professional volunteer fire department. And again, I'd love to thank our new sponsor, Wright Rescue Systems. It's just great that they came forward to sponsor these shows. And before I sign off, let's hear from the good folks at Wright Rescue Systems one last time.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot Rat. You can find us at wrightrescuesystems.com.
Excellent. And again, thank you for tuning in to the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. My next show will be Tuesday, March 29th, and I look forward to having you listen in then. And again, if anybody would like to reach out and connect with me, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. You can email me at tamerrill63@AOL.com. Facebook is Tom Merrill, or I also have a Facebook page for the Professional Volunteer Fire Department where I'm always putting stories up that affect the volunteer fire service or that concern the volunteer fire service. So, and if you'd like me to bring my presentation out where you are, I'd love to do it. I've been doing it a lot, and I really enjoy it. Feel free to reach out to me or just to tell me what's going on in your community and in your department. And as we sign off, again, I always like to sign off with a shout-out, and I'm giving a shout-out to a company not that far from me. There was a nice write-up on this company recently in one of our fire service publications. And that company is the Moyers Corner Fire Department. They're in a county not too far over from me, and they found out about a young resident in their community, a T.J. Zimmerly, who absolutely loves everything about firefighting. And this young boy has been fighting a terrible battle against a rare cancer, a rare blood cancer that he has. And he moved to the county, Onondaga County, where the Moyers Corner Fire Company is in New York State. And the firefighters found out about this boy. As a matter of fact, the boy came with his own turnout gear that was given to him at a birthday party a few years before where we lived in Virginia. And the firefighters found out about this boy when this boy, T.J. Zimmerly, recently celebrated his 5th birthday party right at the fire department. And during that party, members of the department surprised little T.J. by making him an honorary member. The boy was given his own locker, he was given his own name tag, and he was also given his own custom helmet. They made that boy's day. They made their profession, our profession, this great volunteer fire service profession, so proud. And for that, our shout-out of the month goes to the Moyers Corner Fire Department. Job well done. Job well done. Way to exemplify everything that we stand for. And I shout out to you, Moyers Corner. Great, great job. Thanks for tuning in tonight, folks. Wherever you happen to be listening, thank you so much. Remember that being a professional firefighter has absolutely nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service and taking care of not just our customers, but our own members as well. And you know what? Developing, maintaining, and upholding that professional reputation is the duty and responsibility of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. Thank you so much for listening in. I look forward to listening in again with you at the end of March, and I look forward to meeting many of you at FDIC in a couple months. Stay safe, all. Take care.